How's it going, everyone? Nerd Person Shooter here. So, after I finished Oblivion Remastered and got that review out of the way, I had a couple more weeks of Game Pass to try out a few more games, and I have just barely finished three of them. Right on time. Um, One of them is a game that kind of disappointed me. Another is a game that I ended up enjoying more than I thought I would. And the last one is a game that pretty much everyone agrees is the best game of the year, myself included. So I'm going to talk about them for a little bit, give my thoughts on them. Let's start off with the worst one, which was Sniper Elite Resistance. Now, I've grown very fond of the Sniper Elite games. I feel like up until this point, the games have been getting better and better and a bit more sophisticated. Um, Now, Sniper Elite Resistance is, for the most part, more of the same, except it's worse at the same time. At least worse than 4 and 5, which are the two best ones in my opinion. Sniper Elite Resistance, it doesn't do anything new, and it's also buggier. And I find that the maps, the campaign maps, weren't as well thought out than before. And there really isn't much else to say about Sniper Elite Resistance. I don't like the main protagonist as much as the other characters. This English guy, I already forgot his name. Is it Harper or Harker? Is it Harker? I'll have to look it up. I already forgot his name. But he was really annoying throughout the whole thing. He kept saying like really cringy shit. I couldn't get into him. I couldn't get into the story. It's because I didn't like any of the characters that I couldn't really follow the story as well as, the previous Sniper Elite games. I was pretty disappointed. Now, I still enjoyed a fair amount of it. The gameplay mechanics are still the same. Like, pretty much everything is the same. Like, the same template, it just kind of lazy, though. This series needs to be more innovative. If it wants to go forward, it needs to do new things. Sniper Elite 4 is considered by many to be the best one because it brought out certain qualities that were kind of unrealized before. And Sniper Elite 5 was kind of more of the same. Sniper Elite 5 is my personal favorite, but I can see why people prefer 4. But Resistance, it makes the series go back to only being okay rather than good or great. My final score for Sniper Elite Resistance would be a 6 out of 10. It's an okay game. There's still some fun to be had with the gameplay itself. The core gameplay is still there, and it's still fun in certain areas, but between the bugs and the main protagonist being annoying, it's a step back from 4 and 5 to me. 4 is like a 7.5 or an 8, and so is Sniper Elite 5. Resistance is a 6, kind of like Sniper Elite 3, but with no excuse to be as not good, you know? Um, Disappointing, but not bad either. So, yeah, that's the first game I got out of the way. The second game is a game that I wasn't expecting much from, and that's mostly because a lot of people complained about how watered down it feels or how uh, just almost non existent the RPG mechanics were compared to some other games like Baldur's Gate 3, and that game was Avowed. Now, this is a game by Obsidian, the same people who gave us Fallout New Vegas and The Outer Worlds. And, while I don't think Avowed is as great as those two games, I still liked it. I thought it was fine. I thought the story was fine. I thought the characters were fine. Not great, but fine. It takes place in the same universe as the Pillars of Eternity, which is like another Obsidian universe. And they kind of build the lore upon that, and it's about the living lands being plagued by the dream scourge that infects all matters of life, living organisms, whether it be plants or people and stuff. And you play as a godlike who has like a god basically looking out for you, and like you have this voice in your head that's your god, and you're trying to make sense of it while trying to battle the dream scourge and stop the infection. There are two major factions that you can choose with: the Animancers, which are kind of like people who are able to kind of grasp and control the environment, that are trying to treat the land. And then you have the Steel Garrote, which is more authoritarianist, guards and stuff, trying to purge it altogether. And I will admit there is kind of like a black and white. Like they kind of made it obvious which ones are the villains and which ones have a more noble cause. But it didn't really bother me. And maybe that's only because I wasn't expecting much. My hype went down because everyone was just like dogpiling the game and just talking shit about it. You know, a lot of people were complaining that there's no law system. Like you can't commit crimes. You can just take everything. You can strike NPCs with no effect. And like, yeah, that is kind of dumb. But at the same time, games that have those things in place, like Elder Scrolls and Fallout, I don't go around to play those games just to fuck around and find out. Like I don't play Elder Scrolls to assault people and get arrested. So the omission from having a crime system and Avowed didn't really bother me because it would have added something that I wouldn't have even attempted in the first place. So that doesn't really take away any points for me. I don't play games to get in trouble unless you're playing like Grand Theft Auto or something. Like Mass Effect doesn't have a crime system. You can't get arrested in those games either. Are you gonna give those games a bad score too just because there's no law? Not every game needs to play the exact same way as Elder Scrolls or whatever. And yeah, I will admit that there isn't much in the way of RPG mechanics, but god damn it, man, I love the combat in Avowed so much that I don't really care. Like the combat is so good and your hits feel so weighty, and you could have so many different builds. You have two different setups. You can have your primary be like a sword and shield or an axe or a mace with like a gun on your offhand, or like a wand with a spell book. Your secondary can be a bow and arrow, a two-handed bow, or whatever. And it has so many different build varieties that like I don't really need a deep RPG system to really feel immersed, because the combat system was so awesome that when Elder Scrolls 6 comes out, if it isn't even as good as Avowed, I'm not going to want to play it. You know? Like, having just come from Oblivion Remastered, I think I actually liked Avowed more. As much as I still love Oblivion, I think the combat, at least in Avowed, is way better in terms of just like the weightiness and how powerful your hits feel. And I do like the open world. I actually liked it enough to explore everything, like do every side quest, find every collectible, do every companion quest, or find all the upgrades and stuff. And there's four main regions, each one a different biome. You have like a grassland with a port town. You have a swamp. There's a desert, and the last one is a volcano. And they each have their own major settlement and stuff. And I had fun with it. It's not perfect. It's far from perfect. There are some bugs, And, maybe the world itself isn't as interesting as something like New Vegas or even the Outer Worlds, but I still had a ton of fun with Avowed. The story could have been a little bit better. The factions could have been a little less black and white and more morally gray. There's some room for improvement, and yeah, the RPG mechanics could have been deeper, but it didn't really take away my enjoyment of it. I would give Avowed an 8 out of 10. I thought it was overall a good game. You just have to get over not having really complex RPG systems. If you go in expecting something as deep as Baldur's Gate 3 or whatever, you're going to be a little disappointed, but if you start to embrace the game on its own merits, I'm sure you'll have some fun with it, as I did. So Avowed for me gets an 8 out of 10. I was expecting like a 6 or a 7 at most, so I ended up enjoying that game more than I thought I would. Now, this last game is Clair Obscur Expedition 33, a debut game by a very small team of people, like 30 people, with almost no hype before it came out, and it took the gaming industry by storm. I'm sure you've heard enough about Expedition 33. I almost don't even want to get into the story because it's so amazing that like I don't even want to talk about it. I just want to say you guys need to play Clair Obscur Expedition 33. I want to give a little synopsis on what it's about. Hopefully without spoiling anything by accident. It takes place in this world that is basically governed or dictated by this entity known as the Paintress. And each year is like a countdown of the age of people in which they get exiled, called a Gomage. Kind of like Logan's Run, the movie Logan's Run, except it's not every time a person reaches the age of 30 and they get sent off to be killed, but every year the age of people who get exiled get younger and younger. Say like if she had painted year 40, every person who turned 40 that year would get exiled and try to survive off of the really harsh and unforgiving um I don't even know the name of the actual like realm, but you get sent off to die essentially. And this time around it's the groups of 33-year-olds, Expedition 33s, who get exiled into Gamage. And you're playing as a group of people who are trying to break the cycle and reach the Paintress and kill her and end the cycle of the Gomage. And that's all I want to say about it. There are tons of plot twists, and just it is crazy. It is insane how philosophical and emotionally deep the story gets the more you progress. And oh, I should probably stop now. I love this game. I actually didn't at first because there are some design choices that are kind of, I don't want to say antiquated, but they're designed in the way that it feels like an old classic PS2 RPG. There's no mini map. So it's really hard to explore separate areas when you're completionist like me. It's kind of hard to keep track of things that you've already done and explored. So for me to kind of like want to explore everything before progressing through the main story too much, it was kind of hard for me to keep track of where I've already been. But that kind of all went away when I reached the last segment of the game that kind of like allowed you to explore basically everything. Now, the gameplay itself is a turn based RPG, but with a lot of emphasis on quick time events, parrying, dodging. So you really, really have to get good at that and try to like pay attention to the patterns of each and every different enemy. This is an RPG that is kind of hard to learn, not only because of that, but because each individual main character has their own kind of like combat gimmick that you have to learn. Not only that, but it's very hard to master too. This RPG has an incredible amount of complexity to it. There are different abilities that you can equip on top of leveling up your stats. There's just a lot of different builds that you can do, even more so than Avowed. And I am just blown away by it all. The story, the gameplay, the characters, the music. Holy shit, one of the greatest soundtracks I've ever heard in any medium. The art style, everything about this game is just like sublime. And the fact that it was made with such a little team of people. The voice acting is great, although I will say that the lip syncing, because this is a French game, the English dubbing doesn't sync with the French. So I would probably recommend playing it with the French dubbing with English subtitles. And it's not a perfect game. It did crash on me a couple times. Granted, I played it on the Series S, which is probably the worst version, the worst possible way you could play this game. And it crashed on me on two occasions, both right after a story boss. And that kind of pissed me off. So I don't know what that's all about. But aside from that, I really don't have anything bad I can say about it. It is the best game of 2025. This is the game of the year. And probably will be in December. My final score for Clair Obscur Expedition 33 is a 10. I think it's the first time I've ever given a 10 on a Game Pass review video. This is the best game on Game Pass right now, I think. Like, even if you're not a big fan of turn-based RPGs, I highly recommend you check it out. You never know. It's a very engaging turn-based RPG. It's not just you take turns. It's you can dodge and parry pretty much every attack. You just have to know exactly when. And it can be very unforgiving at times, especially in the third act where all the side content is like brutal. It's just a very engaging RPG in every sense. The characters, the story, the gameplay mechanics, the artistic representation of its world. I've actually grown to love the exploration of not knowing where anything really is, because that just makes finding high quality items really rewarding, kind of like playing a Souls-like, or a Dark Souls game where you don't know where anything is the first time around, and when you find something that you were looking for or that you could really use or would be really helpful to you, you're like, nice. So I was thinking about giving it a 9 because of the lack of a mini map or lack of helpful navigation, but at the end of the day, it grew on me. Like, everything about the game grew on me. I want to play through this game again. I'm gonna want to buy this on PS5 and play it. Actually, going back to Avowed, I think I actually liked Avowed enough too that I would want to play through it again with different choices, like assisting the Steel Garrote rather than the Animancers. I feel like I'm forgetting something about Expedition 33, but just what a game. What an outstanding game by a very small team. And this is their very first game. Like, holy shit. This is the kind of RPG that'll take you back to when JRPGs were like in their prime. Like, we're talking like, Final Fantasy 7 through 10. It's really that great. It is outstanding. It is the best game of 2025 so far and likely will remain so. I can't picture, Ghost of Yotei or Death Stranding 2 or whatever to be better than this. I can't. I do still have to play Doom the Dark Ages though, but I am planning on playing it on PS5. So I'll give a thoughts video on that when I eventually get around to that. But yeah, guys, don't expect much from Sniper Elite Resistance if you haven't tried that already. You might enjoy Avowed a little bit more than you thought you would because a lot of people liked to hate on it. And I highly recommend to anyone Clair Obscur Expedition 33. So yeah, coming up next on my YouTube channel, get ready. I am preparing to do a full Let's Play of Onimusha 2 Remastered. Another beloved game from my childhood that will probably reignite some good memories. So I hope you guys will join me. We'll play through that and yeah, that'll be next week. So stay tuned, and until then, thank you very much for watching.